Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Dan Saffer.
And I'm Nick Martellero, and we're faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields.
Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here. This week, we're taking a look at what Apple launched at WWDC last week and what that means for designers.
Airbnb CEO is starting a new AI lab, but it's not focused on what you think.
Sarah Gibbons names the 4 design jobs that AI has created. Is AI podcaster one of them?
And finally, we discuss an article from Perplexity Research on how AI agents reshape knowledge work. But first, let's get started with what Apple launched last week at WWDC, which is their worldwide developer conference. There were a lot of new announcements, especially with a big focus on Apple Intelligence and the new Siri AI. In addition to sort of these platform announcements that often are very consumer-facing, so it's very exciting to see what people are going to get on their new devices in the coming weeks and months. There's also a lot of really good information as part of WWDC for designers and developers to learn about the new tools that are available to them to build their app experiences with. So the big news, of course, was that they launched a long-awaited update to Apple Intelligence and Siri with Siri AI, which will be a lot more conversational. It'll have more ability to access what they call world knowledge, where Siri can access information in your messages, your mail, or on the screen. And they're promoting this, as they usually do, with a lot of privacy considerations, also touting their private cloud compute, which is their own cloud compute solution, which is doing AI work on their systems and with privacy in mind, rather than sending that off to, say, third-party model providers. This includes even their partnership with Google. They're working on a way to ensure that customer data is still private, even when using those services. For an example of the kind of demo that they gave, there was a cute one where a user asked about, hey, what was that cookie recipe that Maria was messaging me about? And Siri AI can then search your messages, pull up that message, and then conversationally says, hey, you want me to pull up a recipe for that, which it could then search the web for, or would you like me to draft a message to send back to Maria to ask about the recipe or ask about the cookies? So this is a lot of what I think we have been expecting since Apple Intelligence was introduced, although this time it does appear that these demos are real. And so that's exciting. We're finally kind of getting to the point there with what Apple Intelligence's vision was supposed to be. We're getting that.
One of the things that Apple is been known for decades now is privacy and trust. And this is a good time to probably lean into that, especially when you're talking about tracking user behavior. And Apple is instead trying to be like, nope, we keep all that stuff private. So I think that's a smart move on their part. But this also begs the question, can other app developers opt into this so that Siri AI can look into them? So can Siri AI find things that are in a Notion page, for example, or something in Spotify for me?
Yeah, so this is something that is coming up as developers start to integrate these features into their own applications to give access. So pulling actually from a newsroom article that we'll link to here, it says, with the latest enhancements to Apple Intelligence and the introduction of Siri AI, developers can make their app's content and capabilities more discoverable and accessible across the system. And the way that they're doing this is through app intents. There's the app intents framework, which basically allows app developers to connect things and give Siri AIs the understanding, information, app actions, all these things. But basically, you have to be using app intents. Now, this is a little different from, say, I'm just providing, say, an MCP server to the built-in Apple Intelligence frameworks. So that's a little different from how we're seeing, for example, integrations between OpenAI or Claude with all kinds of apps. Basically, app developers are going to need to start using these app intent framework to start updating their app. We won't see as much of this until these apps become updated with the new app intent features.
If they want to at all. For example, Spotify might say, forget it. I'm not letting you into Spotify. You have Apple Music. Go do that.
Companies may want you to use AI that's baked into their product and the experience, which they could use either Apple or other third-party providers for. So there's an interesting question of control here, right? In the same way that when you open up an MCP server and you allow your Claudes and your OpenAI ChatGPTs of the world to interact with your app, you're kind of ceding a little bit of that interaction design to the frontier model developers. The same thing here. You kind of have to choose, like, do I have built-in intelligence features within my app, or do I actually open it up for Siri?
I was thinking you could use Rufus for Amazon, but then I remembered they killed Rufus. Rufus is now just Alexa. So pour one out for poor old Rufus. I don't think Amazon would allow this anyway.
Yeah. So a couple things here. Actually, this brings up a good point. One of the things about WWDC that's important is that this is the developer conference, and so there's a lot of other content that's out there on sort of new tools and frameworks, platform features that are really on the designer and developer side of things. A couple things to maybe highlight if you want to have some guidance on where to look on the specific presentations that they gave. If you are building agentic and AI experiences, there's a lot that looks like it came out on how you're evaluating how good that is. And so they have a new evaluations framework there. I saw a lot of videos there on that. In addition, if you're using Xcode to develop your apps, they have some new agentic capabilities that can do UI prototyping, where you sort of, in the same way, like a vibe coding style of things, you can say what you want and it'll start laying it out. I actually think that would be really nice because unlike, say, those of us who work in more of a web-based frameworks, who have maybe learned how to do our interaction design there, the Apple UI frameworks are a little bit different. And so actually, this could open up native app design to more people. This has been something that where a lot of vibe coded or even just agentically coded things are not utilizing native capabilities as much because they're built on web framework type things. So that's kind of cool to see. Lastly, maybe just as a note, because I saw this in one of the articles that I didn't even totally expect, which was that you're going to need some new hardware. The newest Apple Intelligent features are only going to work on devices like the iPhone Air, iPhone 17 Pro, M4 iPads, and M3 Max, each with 12 gigs of memory or more. That basically means that if you don't have the device, you're going to have a stratified user experience. So if you are starting to use these more powerful Siri AI features, your users have to have the newest devices to be able to access them. If you have older devices, they did say that Apple Intelligence features will work, but just not with the newest, best models, and likely probably not with the best experiences. Just something to note. I'm sure that everyone is excited to go purchase some new hardware.
And by newest, you mean like this year's models and next year's models. My poor iPhone 16 Pro left out of this. It's like a year old. It's a little bit of a gut punch to me. I won't lie. So sadness.
Yeah, and again, I think that the interesting thing here is that in this sort of space of stratified user experience, as you start to build these features, this is one of the things where if you're using cloud-based models, you didn't have to really worry about. I mean, someone's device might not be super fast, but in theory, it would be able to render and show these things. So it's interesting to see. There's pros and cons of using, say, the on-device machine learning capabilities. I think that Apple still has a leg up here because of the devices.
Yes, but first, let's roll back. A year ago, people were like, Apple doesn't know anything about AI. AI is going to cripple them. And this year, I think because of the landscape and because they have the hardware, they might just pull this off. You've got OpenAI and Anthropic that are shifting towards enterprise, and they're doing coding use cases and stuff like that because that's where the money is. Meanwhile, Microsoft is not really looking at consumer products. It's looking more at the stuff that we talked about last week, which is Microsoft 365 and enterprise style tools on their side too. Meta is thinking about its own smartphone ecosystem and the Ray-Ban glasses and stuff like that. Nothing really happening there of too much note. And then Google, it's one big competitor, it's got Android, and it's also getting its Warby Parker glasses and stuff like that that I'm very interested to try. But Google is also now feeding Apple the foundation model here. So that's probably pretty good for them. So they're actually looking like they're going to be in pretty good shape. Apple is saying, well, these other people are doing this stuff in AI, but we are actually going to make AI for the rest of us. The kind of Apple, it just works. They're going for simple. They're going to treat Siri as this centralized way to handle all these AI flows across their devices. And it's going to be with a level of trust that these other companies just can't match. So I think that this strategy has somehow worked out for them. And great. I keep thinking about this is the AI for the 80% who aren't really using AI tools right now.
That leads us a little bit into the next story here. A short one is that Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, a designer founded company, is reportedly developing an independent AI lab aimed at crafting novel models and reimagining user interactions with AI services. While other tech executives are focusing heavily on conversational AI, chat based AI, really focusing on sort of the intelligence component of it, Chesky is prioritizing the design, user experience, and interactive systems as the driving force of the next wave of AI innovation.
What do you think this is? Is it hardware? Is it software? Is it just AI baked into different kinds of interaction models? I mean, I'm all for all of that, really. I know that OpenAI is definitely looking into the hardware space with Johnny Ive, and hopefully that'll turn out better than Johnny's Ferrari did, but I'm pretty dubious. So I wonder what this is. I mean, literally, this is all we know. It's top secret. The only other piece of info here is that he's not going to be the CEO of it. Somebody else is going to do it.
I am not sure. First off, I will say I was excited to see the concept around user experience being the driving force behind this frontier lab. I could imagine there would be exciting ways of exploring how to design new user interaction patterns with frontier models. I guess the question there, though, is like, I'm not sure. And if you want to start a lab and do all this, that's awesome. The question is this going to run like the frontier labs with a product, i.e., the OpenAIs, the Anthropics of the world, where they're still selling something? Like, ideally, they were a lab that was focused on developing new capabilities and technology that ultimately is making its way into products, which get more usage, but that they have something to sell. And the thing about this is, I'm not totally sure what there is to sell. Like, we do a lot of this kind of work here at the HCII, and many other HCI labs across the country are really excited about the way in which AI can improve and change user experience and interaction design. But a lot of our work, oftentimes, our goals are to share what we learn with the world and then hopefully have designers out there like yourself pick up and employ in any product. We're trying to figure out how it is that people can utilize these new capabilities and techniques. And so when you talk about this as a lab model, it suggests to me you want to do something like that. But if there needs to be a product associated with it, and this was something that I read in one of the short articles about this, was it was like, that this is going to drive the experience of all kinds of different apps. The question is are they going to build these apps?
Right. Or are they going to make it open source and give out components or give out their models? What are they doing? I'm wondering if they're going to be like thinking machines, them?
Yes, I think that Thinking Machines might be a good comparison. So Thinking Machines, this is one of the companies that actually spun out from some of the people who left OpenAI. This is Mira's company, and their focus was a lot on interaction. Actually, they had a pretty cool demo. We'll link to it in the show notes, where they were showing us a voice-based interaction that was super fluid, right? Back and forth. It could see what was on the screen. It could see what was in the world. So it was actually like if you had a camera and it was looking at you. And it seemed like they were focused a little more on really the very fluid interactivity, getting away from still conversational, but getting away from sort of the chatbot model.
Right. It was a much more back and forth, just like this conversation is, but with an AI.
Yeah, and I think with this, so maybe in that way, right, the way that Thinking Machines is exploring super real-time interaction capabilities, this new initiative might be focused on what are the new AI native ways of interacting with software that we might have. But again, for both those cases, I'm not entirely sure what the product is. But I mean, again, that's fine. I'm all for R&D and then seeing what people do with it. So who knows? Hopefully they're going to be hiring. And so folks out there, maybe you should keep an eye on this and see if you're interested in being a part of one of these interesting frontier lab type initiatives.
Yeah, it's great to see design led initiatives happening in this space because so many things are, they're not. They're being led by the technology at this point, which is understandable because it's new technology that is changing all the time. But it'll be interesting for places to start taking a design lens and putting that front and center, which brings us to our next article. This is Sarah Gibbons from the Nielsen Norman Group, the NNG. I wonder if Norman is even involved. Is Don involved in this anymore? I don't know, but Jacob certainly is. But that's neither here nor there. So Sarah Gibbons wrote this article called "The Four Design Jobs AI Created So Far." And what it is taking a look at four places where AI has been impacting or affecting our design work. And the big one is, of course, the one that we talk about the most, which is designing with AI. And this is what your class is all about, Nick, the AI augmented designer. And this is where most designers are today. They are using AI in their design process. But then she calls out the next three that are less known, less talked about, but growing in importance. So the next one is designing AI products. And this is, we teach the class designing AI products and services. That's what this is about. How do you use AI as a design material to start incorporating that into existing products and creating brand new products that are AI forward? And then you get the two smallest chunks, which are designing for AI agents and designing the AI itself. And this is a small slice that is growing in demand, but there's not a lot of people that are working at this, and there's very little supply of people who work at Anthropic or Gemini or OpenAI or those kinds of places who are actually working on the actual foundation models and tools that are coming out of that, which I guess would be AI products. And so, but people that are actually designing the things to make other things is what those last two buckets are. So kind of an interesting breakdown of what, I don't know if I would call these jobs per se, but I think this is more about where AI is affecting designers in four different kinds of ways. So I think for that, it's a really interesting model.
Yeah, I also think that the breakdown, I mean, it's a rough sketch of how many designers are working in these areas, but I generally agree with what's presented. Most people are probably designing with AI, with fewer kind of designing the AI themselves. I do think, though, we're going to start seeing a shift. So, with more and more people designing with AI, actually, one of the interesting things here is depending on your flavor of designing with AI, you might be utilizing products and services that other folks have created for you to use, but you also might be putting together your own systems. We talk about this here on the show a lot about putting together your own workflows and then mixing agents together to actually do stuff. We've promoted articles of people doing this because we think it's cool. And the interesting thing there is, I think actually the more that designers start doing that, the more they'll be able to transition over into that category of designing for AI agents. As they start to develop their own agents for, say, their own workflows, I think they're going to start to understand this materiality of AI agents better. And that can help them to start designing for AI agents and also start designing AI products and services that use agent backends in a better way. So I mean, maybe the way to start in this area is to actually start just designing your own work processes to kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah. And agents is probably the place to do that. And that brings us to our final article, which is all about Perplexity. So, Perplexity did a bunch of research along with the Harvard Business School looking at how people were using their product computer. And I love saying that like Star Trek style. It is what computer is, if you've never used it, it's essentially an AI assistant that can see and navigate and control your desktop to execute complex multi-step tasks on your behalf. So a very powerful Claude bot like agent. And the question that they were asking was, how does this change the nature of knowledge work across professions, and which transformations from these kinds of tools might we expect? And the big finding that they had was that using computer expanded both the breadth and depth of what users were accomplishing, and doing that at a lower cost. They were getting more work done at higher levels of abstraction and crossing disciplinary boundaries. And that is all interesting. Now, I want to before this becomes a Perplexity computer ad, I am going to give a bunch of caveats here. So, number one, this research was early with a product that had just launched, and the early adopters are really skewing pretty heavily towards AI natives, people who are very used to AI, people that are actively experimenting, and those patterns are rapidly evolving. They're rapidly shifting across the product landscape. And so what is working now may not be what works in 6 months from now, or will have entirely changed in 6 months from now. The second caveat is that the estimates that they did about efficiency are possibly way off, because it's very hard to say how much time and attention a task will take in the real world compared to what an agent can do. So, all of the efficiency percentages and stuff, definitely take those with a grain of salt. But a couple interesting things that they found here. So, the first one, if you've ever done anything with an agent, that this should be pretty obvious that it requires a lot more upfront effort, because you've got to tell it what to do, you've got to tell it what not to do, what the goal is, and it requires a lot of effort up front, but less as the overall amount of effort per unit of work, because the agent's doing stuff for you. So it makes it really effective on long multi-step workflows. So the work is both deeper and cheaper, but there is this longer time period up front getting started. What are we talking about in terms of length? So they looked at kind of two big tasks. One was search, and that usually returned a response in seconds. But then when it was doing things that were more agentic, the computer kept working for like minutes or even hours. And it would do searching, browsing, editing, running code, all those kinds of things. And those could take, I think the average was like 9 minutes. So a really long time. But the longest was in hours, not like an hour or two either, like 20 hours, like a long period of time. And I think that's a really interesting design opportunity. How do you actually start to design for things that take a 9 hour time period? But a couple interesting findings with those long time periods: it didn't actually translate into more abandonment. The user stop events, they were similar across both search and using. And they were both like 3%, 3.7, 3.4. So not a big variation there, despite one taking so much longer than the other. The other thing was that quality didn't fall with the higher autonomy. On turn by turn sessions, that next turn dissatisfaction was only 1.3% in the computer sessions versus 3.4% in search sessions. So actually, search did worse in that evaluation. So here's where things start to get a little wonky, where they were trying to figure out how long these things take. They looked at 18 different domains and they found that there was a 79 to 92% time savings and an 87 to 96% cost savings. Now, again, big caveat here, it's very hard to estimate how long things would have actually taken doing them by hand or without an agent's aid. But they found, not shockingly, that programming was the most extreme case here. So something that was taking 596 estimated minutes was only 48 minutes for computer and human. So that was like a 92% time reduction. And that yielded a 96% cost reduction. And the places where they found that this was the most advantageous were a couple different ones: business, technology, education, and writing. And then they looked at a sample of 8,000 users from 8 different occupation clusters, and they found that 59% of them were actually using computer to work outside of their primary occupation. And probably unsurprisingly, one of those increases of that 59% was in arts and design. The other ones were management and entrepreneurship, digital technology, which probably also includes design, and healthcare and human services. So, interesting couple tidbits in there from computer about how these things are actually affecting work.
I think one of the cool things that you're seeing in this is the fact that they're trying their best to measure the kinds of things like time reduction, cost savings potentially. And they are getting down into the kind of tasks that people are doing. And so I'm not surprised, for example, to see that programming is where a lot of efficiencies are coming from. But this is a question that a lot of companies are now starting to ask, which is like, where are we actually saving, say, on time or actual cost of the work to be done? And then, of course, are you getting the quality from that? So that's one thing I like about this, that they're trying. And I think that if you're working out there to implement AI in different aspects of your workflows, whether it's sort of this computer use, fully agentic, or even smaller things, like this article might have some good inspiration for how you might measure that and see that you're actually getting some impact and return on that investment.
Yeah, I think what I would love to see is more of this, like some real actual studying of what the actual savings and time actually are. Because all we get now is hype. And I mean, maybe we could even put this into the hype category as well. But it does have some numbers to back it up. It does have the Harvard Business School researchers, so it does have some, academic cred to lean back on. But I would like to see more numbers about how this is actually working, how this is actually affecting knowledge work jobs would be really interesting. And I also think that rather than saying, well, this is saving us so much money and so much time, which I wonder if this was pre-token hikes in terms of how much money was actually being saved here. But being able to say, like, hey, the benefits to this are things like being able to work in broader ways and pull in more information from areas that I don't know as well. And that alone is valuable, whether you're working in healthcare or in technology or management. So I think there are benefits and negative drawbacks that we should be doing more research on. And I'd love to see more companies partnering with academic institutions to do this kind of research,
I agree with that.
including Carnegie Mellon. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Hashtag shameless plug.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode. Brief as it was. Hope you're enjoying your summer. One programming note is that Nick and I are off next week. I will be at Config to catch all the product announcements in person and to get reactions and interview some speakers and attendees. If you see me, come say hi and stay tuned for that very special episode, which will drop on June 30th. So hope to see you then. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.